Joining us now is John Carney, finance and economics editor at Breitbart.com. John, thank you for taking the time. So, John, a lot of people are confused. Explain to us what the court ruling was yesterday, which was preventing President Trump's use of the IEEPA, which was the Emergency Powers Act when it comes to tariffs. Explain to our audience what happened yesterday.
Right. In the trade courts, they like to refer to it as IEEPA. So it is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. It was the legal basis on which President Trump had imposed the fentanyl tariffs, fentanyl trafficking tariffs on China and on Mexico and on Canada, and also the worldwide 10% tariff, the reciprocal tariff on everybody. So traditionally, IEEPA is actually a statute that's used to impose sanctions. The sort of modal version of it is Jimmy Carter is the first person to ever use it. He uses it to impose sanctions on Iran after they took Americans hostages at the embassy. So it's typically a sort of, freeze assets, impose sanctions, not usually, has never actually been used to have very broad tariffs. This was a novel legal approach that the Trump administration was doing, saying we can declare an emergency. We're allowed to block things altogether under this, so we should be allowed to impose tariffs under it. The Court of International Trade, which is a specialized court in Washington, D.C., that hears trade cases, and I think it's important that it was the Court of International Trade. This isn't some like radical left-wing district court judge who did this. This is actually a pretty respectable court and respectable panel. They said, no, you can't impose tariffs under this act, that there is nothing in the act that says you have the power to impose tariffs. That's too broad of a reading. And they said, if you could impose tariffs under this act, we think that would be unconstitutional because it would be Congress delegating too much authority to the president. The Constitution says Congress sets tariffs, and Congress can't just say to the president, no, we're going to let you do it. So this same panel, interestingly enough, also tried to prevent some of Trump's tariffs in the first term, and they got that overturned. That was under a different act. It was a different legal basis. They tried to say you couldn't impose the metals tariffs, and they got that overturned. So they don't have a perfect record here. The Trump administration is obviously going to appeal it, but the decision isn't, it's not nuts. I mean, it has some good, I would say conservative legal jurisprudence behind it.
So can Trump simply redo the tariffs using the Trade Expansion Act of 1962?
Yeah, he probably can. He probably can just come back. He has to do, the thing is, under those acts, under all the other acts where they've been put 201, 232, you'll hear all these numbers thrown around. You usually have to have a little bit more procedure. So you have to have like Commerce Department or the U.S. Trade Representative do a study, produce a paper, and then you impose the tariffs based on that. Now they can do that. They can do it pretty quickly, and it doesn't, the courts are unlikely to say, well, you don't like the outcome of your procedural decision, but there are hurdles. I think the very first step is, yes, they're going to look into imposing tariffs other ways, but what they're really going to do is appeal this. They have 10 days. The court says they have to get rid of the tariffs within 10 days. They're going to appeal it and ask the Federal Circuit, that's who hears the appeals from the Court of International Trade. They're going to ask the Federal Circuit to, one, stay it, and two, overturn this decision. And I don't think we know exactly how that's going to go. I think the Trump administration probably will win that case. I don't think that the courts are going to revive non-delegation. Non-delegation has kind of been a dead law, or a dead judicial interpretation for 100 years. It hasn't been used to overturn any laws. But maybe they do. I mean, it could be ironic, right, that they revive this conservative approach to constitutional law by limiting a conservative president. So, sometimes the courts like to do it cutely like that, I guess.
So I have two questions here. The first of which is that partially, not totally, but partially the reason why the southern border was able to be secured so quickly is that Mexico was able to cooperate. Is that Mexico, it's much easier to secure a border from the interior than from the exterior. It is. It just definitionally, it's much easier to prevent people from leaving your country than from coming into your country. And one of the reasons why Mexico was very quick to help and cooperate is the threat of tariffs against Mexico. Does this make those tariffs against Mexico or the threat of them null and void? And what implications might that have for border security?
Well, I think it would, on its face, basically take away the power of the president to use these sort of tariffs. That's actually an argument that the Trump administration is likely to use in court, because it will say, hey, courts, stop second guessing us in international affairs. We need this power to conduct our foreign diplomacy.
Correct.
There is an economic emergency. There is an emergency at the border. We need to be able to use this to solve that problem. And I think they might win on that ground. I don't think we're going to see like Mexico decide, oh, now that Trump lost this tariff power, because of a single court decision, we don't have to listen to him anymore. That would be quite foolish because, as we were saying, there are other alternatives. And it's very possible that the appeals court will say, no, the president can do this, actually.
So second, this, which is I can imagine there can be immediate action against China, though. The China case is far easier to prove. I think those documents have already been done probably by Biden. And just because there's a new president doesn't mean all the studies, I think that those can be inherited from one administration to the other.
Absolutely.
So I think the Chinese tariffs are largely untouched. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, the Chinese tariffs, the one that may be in doubt here is there was like this additional tariff because of fentanyl trafficking. That could be in doubt. But the administration can just say, okay, fine, we're not doing the fentanyl tariff, but we're raising your tariff on the other grounds even higher. Yep. And that is on much steadier legal grounds. So there's not a real respite for China here. There's potentially a respite for the Canada and Mexico. Or the because EU. Basically the court said, we don't think you can come up with tariffs as a result of fentanyl or illegal immigration. I think that either the Supreme Court or the Federal Circuit may say that they don't want courts second guessing when a president.
Yeah, and so the argument that should be made is that if the administration makes the argument that tariffs are a tool of national security and of protecting the homeland, that it's an economic tool, it's a softer touch than sanctions. I think that's the strongest of all the arguments because we are being invaded. We do have fentanyl coming into the country. If it's just simply and solely on economic means, now, mind you, they could go back and do the studies, I think, pretty quickly. I mean, it's not hard to say that, Germany is definitely compromising American auto companies by, Volkswagen and Porsche and Mercedes-Benz and BMW. So I guess the question is here, and the markets have been somewhat neutral on this. I would have expected a little more of an explosion. We saw that early and then it went down and went back up. I guess this is just more of a delay of the inevitable. President Trump will still be able to use tariffs in one way or another.
Yes, I think that is the way the market's reading it. They said, okay, this court has said stop, but we imagine that the appeals court will put a stay on this order so that Trump will be able to impose the tariffs. That the outcome of this is pretty unclear, so people don't want to get too excited about it. And because there are all these other statutes that authorize tariffs, Trump can come back. Frankly, I think it would be a good idea and welcome for Trump to actually go to Congress and say, I want clear authorization to impose reciprocal tariffs. Anybody who has an fair trade practice against the United States, the president should be allowed to impose tariffs. Congress, give me that direct, call it the Reciprocal Tariff Act, give me that direct power so that the courts can't doubt it and nobody else can second guess it. I think Congress would probably do it. Yes, there are free traders and there are people who would be uncomfortable with that. But I think you probably have a majority in both houses to be able to bring that about.
I'm going to keep you for another segment here, largely because I want you to read the breaking news, and I'm going to read it to you, and then I want you to analyze it in the break. Allegedly, according to what we're seeing, not allegedly, but Obama Judge Rudolph Contreras just ruled that Trump's tariffs addressing the Chinese national security are now halted. So I want you to read that during the break because it kind of, in some ways, is against what we just said. We said, well, there's no way they could stop the Chinese tariffs. Well, I guess they can. And so our team will send it to you in the break, and I want you to analyze that, and then we'll talk about it in just a second. Okay, we are continuing now through this breaking news with John Carney, finance and economics editor at Breitbart.com. John, what is this breaking news?
Yeah, so a judge has ruled that the opioid tariffs, the fentanyl tariffs, in other words, on China also are not authorized by the Emergency Economic Powers Act. It's actually not really that big of a deal. This really just repeats what the court said last night. It is, again, saying that this act doesn't authorize the tariffs. I don't think that will really matter for China because Trump has so many other statutory means to impose tariffs on China, and they did the studies that they needed to do in the first term. Biden has done them as well. So they can just raise that. If the judge says no, you can't do the IEEPA tariffs, now Trump can say, yeah, but I'm just going to raise it on another, under another statute, and it won't matter. So I don't think that this new decision is that big of a deal, but it does highlight that the courts really do not, that at least the Court of International Trade does not think that the imposition of tariffs through this act, and the act does not, and I think this is important for people to keep in mind, the act does not say the president can impose tariffs. It says he can restrict trade, do trade, he can block things. It's a logical extension to say he can impose tariffs, but it's not necessarily clear in the statute. I think the courts are probably going to look at both of these things the one that just came down last night, and say, yeah, Congress actually did delegate this much authority to the president. They really did it, and they didn't put a lot of procedural safeguards. And I don't think they're going to use this case to revive the theory of non-delegation. They could, but I don't think the federal circuit would do that. I think that would have to get up to perhaps the Supreme Court for that to happen.
So John, in closing here, it seems like the president has invented a new way to use tariffs. Yes. Typically, they were either used for economic development domestically or national security reasons. He now uses this as a negotiation tool and tactic. More broadly, do you think this will neuter President Trump's ability to bring other countries to the table, or will he find creative other ways to still use the tariff power?
I think he will find creative other ways to still use the tariffs. I don't think that this is going to substantively affect what they're able to do with tariffs. I think it puts a stumbling block. They'll have to pin it on other statutes. And like I said, I'm not very sure that this gets upheld at all. So, it's a minor stumbling block, but the Trump's ability to, as you were saying, use tariffs to accomplish diplomacy is going to remain, even if this case gets upheld by the appeals court.
John, thank you for your time. Please plug your stuff. How can our audience support you and learn more about you?
Absolutely. The best thing they can do is subscribe to Breitbart Business Digest. You can go to Breitbart.com. It's up on the upper right corner. There's a little thing that says newsletters. Click there. It's free. It comes every day in your inbox. Alex Marlowe, my editor-in-chief, runs it with me. We try to explain every day what happened in the economy, why it happened, and probably more importantly, what's going to happen next. We've been right about inflation. We've been right about tariffs. It's really a great product. And of course, just go to Breitbart.com. That's where you'll find me and all my colleagues.
John, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.